Hello, everyone, and our invited guest, Daphna.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Ian Liu, and my nickname is Ian. I'm the Secretary of Taiwan Group Relations. Taiwan Group Relations and the Chinese Association of Group Psychotherapy will hold a third Taiwan Group Relation Conference in Hualien at the end of August this year. The group relation is an educational activity originated from the Tavistock Institution in the UK and then expanded to the United States and the other countries. This learning models has been proven to promote the learning of personal leadership and the awareness of group organizational dynamics by many practitioners of different areas. In order to allow more Taiwanese people to have the opportunity to know the group relations, we have organized a series of interview sessions, starting from the experience of invited guests, and hope that through the sharing of this guest, more people will know what group relations are. Today, I'm very happy to invite the guest, Daphna Bahat. She is a clinical psychologist, supervisors, consultant of organizations, the past chairperson of OFEK, which is the group relation institution in Israel.
Hello. Again.
Okay. In the next 30 to 40 minutes, I have 5 questions. So I just go one by one, and I will ask one and you can answer one. Okay.
I try. I'll do my best.
Okay. So how did you come into contact with group relations?
Well, I think it was almost, 25 years ago, almost. I was still an intern, in clinical psychologist intern in this place, and this place used to send people to conferences.
Oh.
Like every year, 1 or 2 were sent to a conference of group relations, an OFEK conference. So I guess it was my turn, and I wanted to go. And since it was clear that I was going, I didn't want to hear anything about it. You know, I wanted to come. I understood it's a wow experience.
Yeah.
So then I didn't want people to tell me what's going on, how it's. I just wanted to experience. So this is how I came to the first conference. I was rather young then, and indeed it was a wow experience.
Yeah.
I think that it changed my perception of the world, you know, of my life and of the world. I can see it both when I read literature, when I listen to the news, when I read the papers, if I bother to, which I don't bother so much, but any now and then. It influenced my clinical work because I see things more also out of a systemic perspective and not only from the personal or not only from the intrapsychic and the interpersonal perspective, but also from a more systemic perspective, whether it is about families or about workplaces or about group of friends or communities. I have like another glasses to look through at the world since I first met this model, this thinking. Then a weird thing happened because after the first conference, again, it was a wow it was a wow conference. But if you met me a week later and asked me what is it that you learned, I think it would have been quite difficult for me to express or to articulate or to conceptualize what is it that I've learned. I'm not sure I would be able to fully comprehend, and say, I learned this and that.
Yeah.
Then a year after, somehow it turned out that I could be sent again.
Yeah.
Just a year after my first attending, I was attending another conference, another OFEK conference in Israel.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was completely different. I was much more bold. I was much more into leadership. If at the beginning, with the first conference, the title was something, I don't remember exactly, but it had authority and leadership inside it. And in the conference, the staff or the people were talking about leadership and authority, and I didn't understand why they're talking about it. What is the relevance of leadership and authority? I'm to be a clinical psychologist. I'm interested in relationships between people or with self-awareness and knowing yourself. What is the connection of this and leadership and authority?
Yeah.
I didn't understand it at the beginning. But then in the second conference, I saw that I was I realized that I do want to influence. I do want people to listen to what I have to say. I am aware of leadership issues, of authority issues, of who is listening to who, who is following who. Sometimes, even when you're a group of friends or you're just doing something simple, there is this person that everybody looks in the eyes when they're talking to, and there are other person that not. So I realized that these issues does interest me, and I realized that I was different. So and it's not the year that have passed that changed me, that I grew up, because it was a year difference between. So it was clear to me that the effect of the first conference I attended had its influence on the second one. So even though I didn't know how to articulate what I've learned, I realized that I learned a lot. So for me, I get populations. I think if to make it general, I think you can learn three things from group relations conference. One is about how system works. What are the dynamics of systems? And when I talk about system, I talk about whenever there is more than one person. Whenever it can be a couple, it can be a family, it can be a group, it can be an organization, it can be society, it can be a community, whatever. It could be a global. Even you can understand the globe through systemic understanding. So that's one level. The other level, to better know yourself, to understand what motivates you, to understand what is your relationship to authority and to leadership. And I'm not talking only in theory, what happened to you in front of authority figures, or how do you take your own authority when you are the authority figure and stuff like that. Or what are the, I would say, it's in Hebrew, I'm not sure it applies to English, what corners you get into, again and again, like, something similar happened and I don't know why and how. Yes. So these kinds of things, and what happens to me in a group, what role do I take? Or roles. Some of them are formal, but some of them are informal, like being the clown, like being the critical person, like being the one who also always defend the week or being whatever. And some of these roles are not known for us. We don't know them. They're unconscious, you know, for us. So we don't really realize that this is the role we take and why we take it. So this is the second thing we can learn from a conference. And the third thing is the ability within the conference to practice some new behaviors, to practice taking more leadership, to practice more following if we are people who don't know, you know, if we are kind of people that follow, being a follower is more difficult to us. Or, you know, even some people, you know, that are shy, for them to practice to talk in front of a large group of people. So there are lots of, since it's a whole week, which is somehow, how would I say, like a bubble of a whole week. You can, as if it's a kind of a game, you can play and you can at least try new ways of being and of behaving for yourself. So so for me, really, you know, since this first conference 23 or 4 years ago, in which I said, I don't understand why they're talking about authority and leadership. Later, I joined OFEK board and some committees in OFEK, and later I became the chair of OFEK. So a lot has happened during these years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Daphna, what you share is really rich, and what I hear is the first conference is a experience, and I think maybe for all of us it's both, or it's all that kind, is very similar, and I hear that the other things you learn or you experience is you change your perspective. Maybe you can see many things in a systemic ways. And I think the last part that you talk about, the 3 things that we can learn from the group relation conference, I think is related to our last questions, that is there anything you wants to say to the potential participants who may be joining the upcoming group relation conference in Taiwan? So I think I will go on with these. So except the 3 levels of the things that they can learn in the group relations, and is there anything you want to say to the potential members?
Yeah, maybe yeah, it's, you know, it's a long living model, you know, which is very professional and very, although it's, you know, a wow experience, it sounds a bit mysterious but it's very well kept, well organized, well, you know, like very professionalist thing. And it's a wow experience that you can really learn a lot from. And of course, there is also theory behind it. A lot was written and developed through this in this model. And I want to say a word to people who already participated once or more. Of course, the first, you know, as been said, the first cut is the dipper, you know, it's a song, but it's not enough in a way. I mean, so what I'm trying to say is that I learned more and more and more and more throughout conferences I participated, both as a member and as staff, because staff never stop learning as well. You know, it's something which is not frozen. You know, I've learned this and now I can write it down in my notebook and that's it. No, it's a continual learning. And years after I was already a staff member in few conferences, I directed, I was supposed to direct soon, I went as a member again.
Yeah.
And I met completely new things about myself, because the context was different. It wasn't in Israel, it was elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I learned new things that I wasn't connected to before. So what I try to say is that it could be very meaningful to come again to a conference after you already participated in one. So I would encourage people who participated in the previous conferences to come again and to see what they meet again, you know, about themselves, and what they meet which is different. And also, the more you get into these words, you better understand the systemic aspect of it. Because in the first conference, it's a bit more difficult to understand the systemic part. And when you continue attending, you understand more and more about that. So I would say, just come and, you know, be curious enough to work with yourself and with with us, and you know, don't ask too many questions about it. Just try it. It's a life-changing experience. It is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The first conference or the first group relation experience is the most hard and the most not easy to understand, but through the continued joining or continued learning, that you will be much more clear about what happened, about your experience in the group relations.
Yeah. Although it's not that one conference cannot be, okay, I had this experience and it's enough for me. Some people can, it's meaningful enough to have it as a one-off and not to continue. So it could also be meaningful for people.
Yeah.
You know, I was just hooked by that. So I never, you know, I go again and again, but some people, it's enough for them to go once, and that's okay as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you just mentioned that you become the staff of the group relation conference. So I'm curious about what are your thoughts, feelings, and expectations about your role as the associate director of the Taiwan Group Relation Conference?
Well, first of all, you know, this is already getting into the conference material. You know, this is something that I may share in the conference itself, but first of all, to say now, I'm very excited. I'm really thrilled about it. It's not my first time of being an associate director.
Yeah.
I did this role several times, and I also directed several times. But being an associate in a distant country, you know, when we work on Zoom, meanwhile, and experiencing it, I've never been to Taiwan.
Yeah.
So experience the whole thing in a totally different place, which is foreign to me, which I don't know, and trying to make this connection with the other side of the world, in my feeling, it is thrilling for me. Is really I really, you know, looking forward to it. And of course we started the work, because the work for a conference starts many months before the actual conference starts. Yeah. So Daniel, the director, and myself are already and also Vincent, we are working, to prepare the conference, because it takes a lot of preparations and thinking beforehand. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I don't know how much I should get into it right now, but in my view, being an associate is one of the most difficult roles, or maybe enigmatic roles, because actually, in my view, you kind of need to be whatever the director needs you to be.
Yeah.
So it's like a role in which you want to support the director in the best way you can.
Yes.
To be the best director he can, for the conference to be the best conference that can be. And it's always to consider the balance between having your voice heard, and on the other hand, not taking too much room, or something like that. So it's a very difficult role to find out where you want to position yourself and how. So I'm looking forward to it, and to really to work with people that I know little of, and in a country that I know little of, and to see what is where does people are people, and the human psyche is the same, and dynamics and group dynamics are the same, and what may be different in different cultures, and so it's really, I'm really enthusiastic about the possibility to learn more about these things.
Yeah, well, I think I can feel your excitement about trips to Taiwan and the work with us.
Yeah, I am excited.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. So you mentioned that you never comes to Taiwan before. So I'm curious about, in your opinion, what are the similarities and differences between the situation in Israel and Taiwan?
Well, that's a difficult question. I'll try to answer it, but since I have never been to Taiwan, and since I don't know much about Taiwan, although I try to read about Taiwan, and I talked with you, I talked with Daniel, I try to understand the situations, but I may be totally off with what I say, so because I don't really know, and I do hope we better understand after the conference, that you ask me again after the conference, I may be able to answer this question better.
Okay.
But having said that, I have a thought, I'm not sure again, I'm not sure it's true, that there is a similarity in the sense that both countries are small countries that are either a real island or a symbolic, Israel is not an island, but it is an island in the sense that we have kinds of enemy countries around us. So in that sense, we are an island. We can go almost now the situation is a bit different, but there were many years we could go nowhere in the car. We could only fly because no border was in some kind of mutual relationship.
Oh, really?
Now it's a bit different. We do have some some contracts with Egypt, with Jordan. So things are better in that sense.
Yeah.
So I think both countries are small countries that in many ways thrive for their independence.
Yeah.
Or at least have threats from the outside.
Yeah.
You know, have serious threats for their existence and for their independence from the outside. So I think this is similar. I don't know how it influenced people in Taiwan. I know more how it influenced people in Israel. Now in Israel, it's again, the situation is a bit different because you know, since maybe 67, maybe even from 48, Israel in a way is both the small country that tries to live among other threatening countries, but at the same time, Israel is also the aggressor, having the occupied territories. So it's very complicated in Israel. I don't think that there is a parallel thing in Taiwan, that Taiwan also is, you know, occupying another territory. So that's different, maybe. I have a feeling, I'm not sure if it's true, that if you can talk about the character of people, of a people, you know, Israel, of course, we are in the danger of talking with stereotypes. But if I can use some stereotypes, I think Israelis are known to be very open, very bold, even rude. You know, they will tell you exactly what they think. They don't have too many inhibitions, you know, in things. And I have the feeling that Taiwanese people are much more reserved, maybe much more, how do you say, introverts.
Yeah.
But again, it may be a total projection. It may be a total stereotype. I don't know, because but I think there is a kind of a mutual or a shared thing of the persistence against threat, against, you know, difficulties that may be connecting between the two people or the two countries.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Taiwan. Israel now, I think, actually, now I'm talking about the past half a year or so, but it's an outcome of many years. It's not, you know, it's just the end of the iceberg now, that actually the most heavy threat to Israel is now actually an inner. No, it's not a threat from the outside. It's a threat that is connected to major splits in society, that are now getting into a point, to a very boiling, you know, point, and we don't know what will happen, but it may be that this will be the threat that will, you know, destroy or weaken Israel, and not all the, you know, the Arab countries surrounding it. And again, I don't know if there is such split in Taiwan. I guess there is the split between those who want Taiwan to be independent and those who want Taiwan to be part of China. But I don't know if it's a split that you can meet, you know, on the street, you know, that influence the everyday life. Because in Israel now, the split does influence everyday life. It's really we are on the verge of like a civil war, if you and I know nothing about that in Taiwan. Maybe you can say if it's the same or not, but this is where we are.
Okay. Yeah, I think your feeling it's partially correct because yeah, really Taiwanese people is much more inhibited, or you can say polite, and which is the I think which is the culture or the influence from Japan, because Taiwan used to be the colony of Japan. So yeah, Taiwanese people is much more polite and a little different from Chinese people. And about the inner war or the split, I think in recent years, this kind of split has become more and more severe. I think I think one of the factor may be the influence of the fake news from China or from other countries. Yeah, and I have to say this kind of split make each other much more split or make each other much more tense. Yeah,
If I may say, this is the nature of splits.
yeah,
So because, and this is part of the theory of group relations,
yeah,
because it involves what we call, this is a psychoanalytic term, what we call projective identification.
yeah,
When there is a split, what happens is that it can also be in couples, you know, it can be between two parties, but it can be also between couples.
yeah,
Every one of us has parts of himself or herself that we don't want to acknowledge, we don't want to have.
yeah.
So we project them into the other person. So if I put my, let's say, my need to control, okay, let's say I put my need to control into you. So I'm never on time, I all the time late, as if I don't care, as if time has no meaning to me. And I put into you my need for control, and then you become more in a need to control. So you want to be very precise, not to be late ever. And you put in me the other side. So gradually we get more and more far from each other, because this is the nature of split, that you put the stuff you don't want to acknowledge in the other person or in the other group or the other half of society, and then you grew apart more and more, like far from one another, until you can no longer talk to each other.
Yeah, that's true. And I have a question about the situation in Israel. So does the two different parties have some conflict on the street, or maybe with some of the violence, or just they just disagree with each other and conflict to each other's opinion?
Yeah, well, it's not a war. I mean, war with violence yet. There is some violence at the edges, I would say. There is, any now and then there is something, but usually it's not violent. And you know, one part is less, in my mind, one part is much less violent than the other. So, but every week people, thousands of hundreds of people are in the streets protesting against the government and its deed. It's a long story to explain what is going, and it's not on our agenda, but there is a serious threat now to the Israeli democracy. So lots of people are in this, but it's not even only two parts, because Israeli society is divided into at least four parties or parts. You know, you have the secular Jewish people, you have the religious people, you have the ultra-religious people, and you have Arabs. And and you have lots of, you know, each of these also gets into. So it's really now a mess. It's really, and it's scary because we don't know how it will end. And Israel may lose its democracy, and I don't know what will happen.
Yeah. So yeah, because I've been Israel for twice, and I understand there's so many different so different people. For example, Jewish and Arabic, and maybe immigrants. And I think the situation in Taiwan may be a little just a little bit simple, because the people who mostly support that Taiwan go back to China might be the citizens or their children or grandchildren's that was been fleeing from China with the with the KMT party. And the people who much more support about the independent or our own authorities might be the people who originally lives in the immigrants that lives in Taiwan. Yeah. And in Taiwan, there's an interesting phenomenon is sometimes that parents usually have different opinion or different position with their children, but they can still live together, and they know that once they talk about politics, they will fight. So most of the time, they don't talk about that.
They don't.
Yeah.
So you would say that the younger people are more into the independence, even if their parents are you know, or their parents are the ones who flew from China?
Pardon, your question is?
I'm saying, is it that the younger people are more supporting more like the independence of Taiwan, even if they are from families that came from China? So it's also a generational split in a way in Taiwan?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the education or what the parents pass their values about the different politics parties. For examples, because the incidents in Taiwan, the White Terror, has so many victims, and some of the victims that survive might be the people in KMT or just flee from China, and some people, after experience that kind of incidents, that they do change their position. They become a little paranoid, that afraid of any politics issues, but very obviously they will not support KMT anymore or support communism anymore. Yeah, so I think the situation really depends on different families.
Yeah, okay. So maybe that's another thing that is common in a way between Taiwan and Israel, is the amount of terror attacks, maybe.
The amount of
terror, you said.
Yeah.
And you know, there is an Israeli author, a very famous one. His books were translated, I don't know in how many languages. David Grossman is his name. And he says that Israel is an in-traumatic society. This is his term, not a post-traumatic, you know, when the trauma is finished and you suffer from its influences, but you're in traumatic society. So it means that the trauma chases another trauma, you know, you don't finish with it. And I think that a lot of the things that happen in Israel are connected to this in-traumatic situation, you know, and because trauma influence your ability to think.
Yeah.
Trauma influence your ability to integrate and to live in more complex situations and not splitting. And so I think that the trauma, living under traumatic events all the time is influencing. So maybe this is something also which is shared between Taiwan and Israel, probably in different ways, but maybe it's a common thing. We may explore that in the conference, you know, in a way.
I agree with that. Yeah. So the last question is, do you think group relation have any role or influence on Israel?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
For sure, I would say not as I wish it had.
Yeah.
Not as I wish it had. Especially now, you can see how much there is no reflection, no ability to you know, to own anything, to look at yourself and say, okay. So, but having said that, I think that people who are exposed to group relations, again, their perspectives change, and their ability to understand some of the phenomenon in a more complex way is happening. And actually, I you know, it's OFEK exists around 35 years or so, and so thousands of people participated in conferences. Yeah, I don't know how many it can be calculated, but yeah, around a few thousands. You know, and Israel is not a big country. So on the one hand, I'm always frustrated about group relations not influencing enough the society, and I think that there is much more room to try to influence. Really, you know, mainly to influence the country to be a thinking country. You know, it's not about this should be done or the other thing, but to understand what's happening to us. So that's on one hand, but on the other hand, I do, you know, sometimes I read things that people who are not group relations people, journalists or people who write or talk in the news or you know, people who are kinds of how do you say, I'm not sure, not interpreter, someone who, you know, like you watch a football game and there is the commentary people, or so I hear some of their theses. I say that this is a group relations thinking, you know. So maybe in a way we did influence some of the thinking, some of the ways. And also it may be naive out of me to say that we influence society, but I for sure I believe that OFEK as an Israeli organization should try all the time to influence the country to be a more thinking, thoughtful society, to be less splitted society. Whatever people think, to be more, you know, more less crazy,
Yeah.
and less splitted. So I do believe that group relations should try to influence the best we can.
Yeah, I agree with that. The group relation to make people to think about what is the influence from the system, or maybe some of the incidents, that to make people to maybe in some way to stop and to think that, oh, what I am doing, or what this kind of feelings that came into me, then become much more thinking.
Yeah, but also the other way around, like how am I influencing the group? It's both the group, how does the group influence me and maybe mobilize me to do things that are not mine in a way, and on the other hand, how I influence the group, and also what is my responsibility. Even if the group pushed me into something, I still have responsibility for my own deed. So it's
So I can tell the group relation really has its value. So let's do it, Taiwan.
We share that passion for group relations.
Okay, so I think this is today's interview. So thank you, Daphna. Okay.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you if you stayed this long to hear us. And I really hope to meet in the conference, and to extend this dialogue, and to understand ourselves and the world better.
Thank you.